Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. I've been doing a series where I look at a lot of popular and powerful endgame unique items, and today I want to have a look at an item with an interesting past, Maligaro's Virtuosity. So Maligaro's Virtuosity was a very underwhelming unique item up to and including Synthesis League. And in 3.7 for Legion League, GGG selected about 15 of these items that had been pretty unpopular, really common uniques that dropped everywhere, and gave them a massive, massive overhaul. This overhaul was twofold. Firstly, the items were changed to only be available from Legion content and made much rarer. Secondly, the items were given tremendous build around me power boosts. And Maligaro's Virtuosity is no different to the rest of them. However, Maligaro's Virtuosity in 3.14 was removed from the pool of Legion exclusive drops and made a drop anywhere unique. But it's very, very, very rare. So this is what's termed a tier 1 rarity unique, according to some work that's been done in categorizing unique rarity tiering by Poor Fishwife. And in her work, she ascertained that this is a full rarity tier above items like Chevron's Wrappings, Mjolnir, Prism Guardian, some of those items that you might not see very often in a Path of Exile league. This is considerably rarer again, and for that reason, I really only suggest trying to build around this item if you are either in a trade-enabled league, or alternately, if you're in solo self-found and you just happen to find it. So, maybe you're running your 300th map of the league, you get really lucky and you get a Maligaro's Virtuosity. Then by all means, make a character around it. So, this has a number of small stats on it. Dexterity, attack speed, global crit chance, and evasion rating. But the key thing that it's got is this really unique line of text. Your critical strike multiplier is 300%. So firstly, let's talk about its synergies with Perfect Agony. It has very bad anti-synergy with Perfect Agony. Perfect Agony is the thing that causes your critical strike multiplier to instead apply to ailment damage over time multiplier. And let's just say that this, because of the way that Perfect Agony works at 50% of its usual value, Maligaro's Virtuosity is absolutely terrible on those builds. So never use this in conjunction with Perfect Agony. But I just want to get that out of the way because it's a mistake a lot of players do sometimes tend to make. So, critical strike builds typically try to get around 700% crit multi. And this takes enormous investment. This involves using really expensive jewels. It involves spending a lot of points on the passive tree, taking up clusters of notables, and doing a lot of traveling on the passive tree in order to get some of those critical strike nodes. And often critical strike multiplier is the best stat for critical strike builds to scale their damage. However, Maligaro's Virtuosity offers you a deal. It says, I'm going to give you 150% crit multi because your baseline's 150%, so raising it to 300% is 150% on one item. That's massive, but you can't benefit from any other sources of crit multi. What sort of build does that work on? Well, really, it comes down to builds that don't have much ability to spend their passive points, their passive tree points on critical strike multiplier because they have other things that are much more important to them. And those builds tend to be aura stackers. The reason that this is so good on an aura stacker is that for an aura stacker build, every passive point on the passive tree could have gone towards cluster jewels. And most of the power of those builds comes from their medium cluster jewels specifically. And so for that reason, they don't want to be taking a whole bunch of crit multi on the tree. They would rather be taking more aura effect cluster jewels. And so Maligaro's Virtuosity costs them their glove slot, costs them the ability to use a couple of types of crit, or to benefit from a couple of types of crit jewels, but in exchange gives them a tremendous, tremendous boost of power. We have a look at the sorts of builds that are currently using Maligaro's Virtuosity. This is a list of all of the level 97 and higher characters in the Expedition League, softcore trade enabled, that have Maligaro's Virtuosity equipped. And you'll see if you have a look at the skills that they're primarily using, that there are a lot of the popular aura stacking skills. So firstly, we have 40% of them are using Spark as a 5-link or more, 21% are using Ethereal Knives, 17% are using Arc. Now, something that's really important there, and also 6% are using Crackling Lance as well, which is just broadly speaking the same type of skill. All of these are projectile skills that deal, or, well, actually Arc isn't projectile, neither is Crackling Lance, but most of them are projectile skills, and all of them are doing lightning damage. then these builds are typically converting that into cold damage and using this in conjunction with the ridiculously powerful synergy between the auras Wrath and Hatred. The Wrath and Hatred, they scale to the moon by virtue of powerful cluster jewel ascendancy nodes like Replenishing Presence, which gives you 6% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. Purposeful Harbinger, which can give you up to 40% increased effective auras from your skills. First Among Equals, which gives you another source of 6% of increased aura effect on you. And also just the inherent effects of small nodes on those same passive cluster jewels and medium cluster jewels for aura effect, which grant 3%, so they're half as good as a First Among Equals or a Replenishing Presence. This combination of effects allows you to tremendously scale how much of a damage multiplier Wrath is, and then also scale that again once it's converted to cold damage, scale how much of a multiplier Hatred is. And ultimately, this ends up for these builds being a better way to scale their damage than the traditional way of scaling Critical Strike multiplier, rather than sacrificing all of those extra passive points. So that's Maligaro's Virtuosity. How do you go about getting it? Well, the news is basically it is bad. The way you're going to get this item is through extreme luck or through trade. This is stupendously rare and has no good ways to target farm it. There is a divination card called Mitts, which is relatively common and will, for a set of 5, turn in for a random unique glove. However, the problem with Mitts is that divination cards like Mitts end up respecting the relative rarity of the unique items that they produce. And so this means that where Mitts can give you Harim Sorrow, which is extremely common, and can also give you Maligaro's Virtuosity, which is very, very rare, the relative chance of getting a Harim Sorrow is much higher. And I'm just pointing out Harim Sorrow as one example, but there's lots and lots and lots of the alternative items, lots and lots of other quite common sets of unique gloves instead of Harim Sorrow as well. So for that reason, really, you're just going to need to trade for this or find it yourself through dumb luck. You can scour chance deerskin gloves. There's nothing else that deerskin gloves can become. But because it's a tier 1 rarity unique, you can expect to possibly take 10,000 scour chances in order to get it on average. And I certainly am not masochistic enough to recommend that anyone does that. Okay, so what else is used in conjunction with Maligaro's Virtuosity? Firstly, we've only really been looking at what people use this for at Endgame. Well short of Endgame. If you happen to have Maligaro's Virtuosity while you are leveling a character, or once you've recently leveled a character, it can help you with the transition into going Critical Strike. So often, because Critical Strike has what I term quadratic scaling, there's 2 different axes of investment that you can make into Critical Strikes. You can increase your chance of landing a crit, or you can increase the damage multiplier. And essentially, until you've got quite a bit of both of these effects, Critical Strike is a pretty poor way to scale your damage. Maligaro's Virtuosity just takes one of those axes out of the way for you. It solves one of them for you and lets you then invest all of your effort into scaling your Critical Strike chance. And so for that reason, Maligaro's Virtuosity is really good as a leveling item. That said, you probably won't have it for leveling, but if you do happen to have it, definitely go ahead and use it. Additionally, it's something that can be used if you're someone who is early into Endgame. Let's say that you're currently sitting at, say you're running 2 Watchstone maps at the moment. You will find that, and you don't have much in the way of gear, Maligaro's Virtuosity will also help you get started in playing a Critical Strike build effectively. Even if you're only currently working on a 4-link or a 5-link, it will give you a big boost in power. That said, a lot of this is based upon it staying in the 30 chaos range. It is the sort of item that can be very volatile because it's so rare. It's the sort of item that could easily shoot up to 500 chaos or 1,000 chaos if demand increases for it. Anyways, that's Maligaro's Virtuosity, something that I highly suggest that you consider as a piece of endgame chase loot if you're playing anything remotely like an aura stacker, and that you consider as something that's definitely worth using until you grow out of it on a lot of other Critical Strike builds. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, may your Varlobs have interesting results, And do feel free to use them on Maligaro's Virtuosity. Maligaro's Virtuosity is the sort of item that corrupts very, very well, being in the glove slot. It has no implicit. It doesn't have anything important that needs to be divined onto it. It doesn't have any sort of real variance in rolls. The dexterity and the local evasion rating don't matter very much, so you don't mind losing the ability to hit it with divine orbs. It's the sort of thing that corruption in general is made for, because if you hit one good implicit on this, or especially if you hit two, you got an absolute monster. And I must say that getting base attack crit or base spell crit on this item is absolutely amazing for some builds. So that's all I got. Comments and questions below. May your Varlobs have interesting results.